this episode of Colorism Conversations, we're discussing, is preference discrimination? Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Colorism Conversations. It is the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. Once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. Muhammad Ali. I am in charge of my life. I am improving my life by eliminating the drama within it. I let go of everything and everyone that impedes my progress in life. I do not entertain negative thoughts, feelings, or conversations. I choose to be happy today. I am continually aligned with my higher purpose. I am strong.
Welcome back. We are here with Colorism Conversations and our co-host, the public health advisor for I Am the Color of Beautiful Global, Renee Moore. Welcome, beautiful.
Thank you.
We are so excited to be ready to do this show today, and we have a very interesting topic today. They're all interesting topics, but this one is particularly interesting because so often we talk about preference. So what we're going to talk about today is preference discrimination? And when we think about colorism and we talk about what colorism is, we have to look at, when we start talking about what our preference is, whether or not we are being racist or colorist or discriminatory. So we're going to start with what the definition of colorism is. Colorism is prejudice or discrimination against individuals with dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic group or racial group. Now, we've talked about on this show that colorism is intraracial as well as interracial. Intraracial being within the same ethnic group, interracial being with another group doing the same thing from outside of the same group. So that within the same group, when we talk about colorism, it's the idea that, okay, I have dark skin, my sister's light skin, and there is prejudice against me because of my darker skin. If we're talking about someone who is Caucasian and they do it the same way, that they feel that they discriminate against me for my darker skin and not her, that's the interracial colorism. So we've talked about that already. Now we're going to also talk about preference, and preference is a greater liking for one alternative over another or others. So when we talk about preference, we have to be mindful of our preferences. We have to be looking at where those preferences come from and what is the motivation behind what we're calling our preference. So colorism can show up as prejudicial and preferential treatment. So that when you're saying, I prefer, and we're going to talk about this kind of in we're going to talk about it in a broad range, but we're going to start off by kind of talking about it in regard to what we talk about when we talk about who we prefer as a mate. We're going to start with who we prefer as a mate, who we prefer to date, who we prefer to be around. And then we're going to get into the other instances where we start talking about preference. So the idea, so when you start talking about preference and you get into a thing of exclusion. So when you start talking about exclusion with preference, this is where we begin to start getting into discrimination. And we start beginning to get into that whole idea of, I don't want this, I don't like this is not what's beautiful, I only want this, because this is what is beautiful.
Right. So I think that it depends a lot on, once again, why you're making that choice. When you're talking about dating, if you're saying, I mean, everybody has what they find to be attractive. But the problem becomes is when you say, this is attractive only if it's packaged like this.
Right.
So I will only date light skinned women, or I will only date dark skinned women, or I will only date Asian women, or whatever your fetish is. If so, when it becomes to the point where you're excluding people simply because they don't fit your mold,
Right.
then that is discrimination.
Right.
Because if you're a beautiful black or beautiful dark skinned or deeply melanated woman, and you're a guy who typically has only dated light skinned women, what's wrong with asking her out? So you just totally excluded this person
Hmm.
based on the outside. You don't know what kind of person she is inside. And it's to the point where you would rather date, let's say we're talking light skin versus dark, deeply melanated. So you would rather date a light skinned woman who is evil, treats you badly, calls you names, and disrespects you just because that's all you date.
Hmm.
Rather than saying, I will date a brown skinned or deeply melanated woman as long as, I'm looking for the person who treats me the way I deserve to be treated, who respects me, who honors me, who helps me get to where I want to go, who makes me a better person. So it's prejudicial and it's destructive, not only to the culture as a whole, but to you. Because you are basically willing to sacrifice being with the person that God has intended for you to be with simply because of the package they're in.
Right. And some of it is self-hatred also. It's self-hatred of yourself, and it's self-hatred of your people. Because I have heard black men say they do not date deeply melanated black women because they don't want deeply melanated children. They want children for a number of reasons, primarily because they want their children to have a better life, because they feel that deeply melanated people do not have, the odds are stacked against them, and so they will date light skinned women or white women because they want to have these babies who are not deeply melanated. I've heard men say this. And
Well,
then, I'm sorry, go ahead. You want to
so
comment
I,
on
I
that?
find that interesting because with our culture, there's a mixture in most cases that there is somebody in your family who is
Yeah,
deeply melanated.
your
It
grandmama,
may have been your
somebody.
mother, it may have been your grandmother, it may be your sister. So you are essentially saying, I don't want to marry anybody like my mother. Not because of the, because of the color of her skin. I don't want it. So you're saying that. What about your sister who may be deeply melanated? Or your cousin who may be deeply melanated? You are basically saying, I don't respect you. I don't honor you, and I'm not even willing to try to love you.
Right, right. And most families, like you say, most families have a mixture. Now, there may be some families out there that everybody light, or there may be some families out there where everybody's deeply melanated, but most of us, our families are a mixture. Our families are a mixture, and to be able to because I've even heard men who have made comments about deeply melanated women, and they have deeply melanated daughters and sisters, like you say, and mothers, but they come out with this and they say things about deeply melanated women, and you're talking about your daughter, you're talking about your mother, you're talking about your sister. So to come and say, well, I only want to date light skinned women, or I only want to date women that look a certain way or a certain size, but that's a whole nother story. But when you start talking about this whole idea of preference and, well, this is what I like. I don't like that. So again, it's an issue of why don't you like that? And why is it that it is so important for you to have someone who they have to look like this because, and you haven't even had a conversation. You haven't had a conversation. You just automatically, like you said, you just automatically exclude because of some melanin. And we go back again with because of some melanin. You haven't even had a conversation. You don't know what kind of person this is. You don't even know, but that's what you want. So you are excluding. And we talked about before. Now, I know for me, and I don't call it preference, I truly, truly, truly love deeply melanated men. I do. And,
Are fine. But
I really, really do. Now, that does not mean that I do not find lighter skinned men attractive because we've had the discussion before that if I was given the options, because let me tell you, Idris Elba, Morris Chestnut, I was watching Blair Underwood the other day and trying to just pay attention to what the show was about. I love me some Blair Underwood, okay? Okay,
but
but just because of that doesn't mean that I don't think Shamar Moore is not fine. The boy is fine.
Boris
Boris
Kojo.
Kojo, fine. Lenny Kravitz, fine. Okay, so if you say to me, okay, you can have dinner with Idris Elba or Shamar Moore, I'm like, well,
Can I have lunch with one and dinner with the other?
exactly. Can I get lunch with Shamar? Can I get drinks with Blair? Can I get dinner with Eldridge? Can I have breakfast with Boris?
No.
Okay. You know what I'm saying? So it's not that because I happen to really be very attracted to deeply melanated men. I do not exclude light skinned men who are beautiful because God gave us some beautiful things to look at.
Yes, he did.
And he did it in
He
all
did.
shades, all sizes, all shapes. He gave us some beautiful stuff to look at.
He was showing off.
Okay? You know what I'm saying?
Showing off.
You know what I'm saying? Because a few times when I watch SWAT, I'm like, my God, that Shamar Moore is a beautiful man.
Just beautiful. Just
Oh
beautiful.
my God. But I used to say he's too pretty. I can't have a man who's prettier than I am. You know what I mean? Shamar too pretty. But the whole idea is about not excluding and deciding that I will only connect with people who look like this because of whatever your particular thing is. It's one thing to have a certain attraction for a certain kind of person as long as what you're doing is not discriminatory and that you are not deciding that someone else is not worth is not of value or does not have any worth or is not beautiful because they don't look like you said, the package that I wanted in.
And the other thing, is that sometimes when you get to know people, they start to look different to you. Because I will never forget that when I was in high school, there was a young man that one of my friends wanted to date. And he was gangly and knock me. And she said, "What do you think if I dated him?" And I was young and stupid. And I said, "I wouldn't think anything. I would just laugh in your face." Got to know the young man. And I got to know him, he began to look better to me because of the kindness of his heart and the
Yeah.
sweetness of his spirit. It
Yeah.
made him look so much better. And some of those guys that were the finest things, that were
Oh,
stuck on themselves and were treating women like trash,
mm,
they didn't look so good after a few minutes.
right.
So, you really have to not limit yourself, even based on what you're initially attracted to.
Right.
And just like automatically exclude certain people without even having a conversation just because of the package they come in.
Exactly. Exactly. And on that note, we're going to be right back.
We're having a conversation with African American filmmakers. Join the African American Women in Cinema Filmmakers Series at the Clubhouse, presented by I Am the Color of Beautiful Global, every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. AAWIC on Clubhouse. Join us on the Clubhouse app for this inspiring conversation, hosted by Karen Moore, founder of I Am the Color of Beautiful Global, every Monday night at 6 p.m. AAWIC on Clubhouse. We'll see you there.
Welcome back to Colorism Conversations. We are talking with our public health advisor for I Am the Color of Beautiful, Renee Moore, and we're talking about preference. Is preference discrimination? And it was interesting because I had this conversation with someone and they told me when I was talking about it and they said preference is discrimination. And I had to really think about that. So we're kind of really talking about, we're kind of opening up this whole dialogue on preference and is it discrimination? So now we're going to talk about preferences are often socially or individually conditioned. So social conditioning is the sociological process of training individuals in a society to respond in a manner generally approved by the society in general and peer groups within society. The social structure in which an individual finds him or herself influences and can determine their social actions and responses. So this involves many times, it can involve the family. A lot of times the family structure can many times, or the family dynamic can many times determine how you see people, how you see their color, because many times it is put upon the children, it is put upon the members of the family that deeply melanated skin is not beautiful. You know, mothers will say to their sons, don't you bring no dark woman up in here. And so we have this whole social structuring within our families, and many times even within the confines of our schools and our universities, and where a child goes to school and who they're exposed to when they're in school.
Oh, absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be direct comments directed to you.
Mm-hmm.
Children pick up a lot of things just by the things that are said, the actions that are done. So it's those, comments that adults might make or names that they call other people, or the
Right.
way they refer to other people. Perfect example is if, you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl.
Right.
Well, that says to any child listening that deeply melanated skin is normally not beautiful.
Right.
So now you've set up in a young child's mind, whether they're a girl or a boy, that this is not beauty.
Right.
Or the other comments that were made in reference to calling somebody darky and blacky and all that stuff in a way that makes it not attractive.
Exactly.
Those are all signals that are picked up that says this is not what's attractive. This is not what's worthy of love.
Right.
This is something to be avoided. This is get out the sun. You don't want to get too dark.
Right.
So
Right.
this is all setting up a socially acceptable standard for beauty.
Exactly.
Right there in the family. Or, when you get to school and you're around your friends and your friends make those comments about not liking somebody because, they're deeply melanated.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be accepted. That's, when you're in those teenage years, it's so important for you to be socially accepted and socially liked. So you join in that teasing, but you also wouldn't want to date that person because then they'll be talking about you.
Exactly.
So now you've set up a standard for what is beautiful, what is acceptable, what makes me acceptable to be seen with.
Right. And we have to be mindful of the language that we use around our children. And we have to be mindful of the whole idea of embracing all of our children and letting all of our children know how beautiful they are. And we have to begin to, and we have talked about this before. Some things you got to start shutting down in families. You know, no, and I understand that we have, and I'm not saying, I always say we're not to be disrespectful to our elders, but sometimes you got to tell grandma, listen, grandma, we don't talk like that anymore. We don't call these children, we don't call these children names. We do not show favoritism, and we have to call people out on that. Whether it's grandmom or whether it's auntie or whether it's a nephew or a niece, we have to call this out when we see it in our families, that we're not going to tolerate this anymore, that we are going to embrace each other, we're going to love each other, we're going to treat each other, and we're going to stand up for each other. When we're out and about and we're among, and someone says something that's unacceptable, we don't do that.
Right.
We have to
And,
call our friends on it. No,
right.
we don't. We don't do that. We don't
Right.
do that.
And it's also important to ensure that you know what your children are watching.
Yes.
We'll have a whole show about the media and Hollywood and all
Yes.
that. But these music videos that degrade deeply melanated women would always show the light skinned women as beautiful and
Right.
desirable, and the magazines that always show the world's most beautiful woman
Yes.
doesn't typically look like the most deeply melanated woman in the world.
Right.
So these are all signals that we're being fed, and our children
Right.
are being fed about what's beautiful, what's acceptable. So then, when you develop that particular uh, prejudice, is what it is, because I
Right.
don't want that because it's not considered beautiful.
Right.
That's prejudice. It's
Right.
not a preference. It's a preference based on prejudice.
Right. And it's a preference based on also exclusion, like we said, which is prejudice. When you
Yeah,
start excluding people, then that's discrimination and that's prejudice.
absolutely.
So when we talk about individual conditioning, which is relating to characteristic of or meant for a single person or thing separate or distinct, especially from others of its kind. So many times that individual conditioning comes with, like you said, what we're exposed to as individuals, the people that we hang around outside of the family, and we decide we have this individual conditioning that many times is forced on us by the media, is forced on us by print, is forced on us by music, and that begins to get into our head. And as an individual, no longer is it just the social structure or the socialization that we're dealing with, but now as an individual, because of what we've been fed, because of what we're seeing. And what's one of the things that we do for I Am the Color of Beautiful is have images that reflect the beauty of deeply melanated women, and the and words that talk about how beautiful deeply melanated skin is, because we have been so indoctrinated as to this is what's beautiful. We've been indoctrinated that Beyonce is what's beautiful, that Halle Berry is what's beautiful. And I'm not taking away from the fact that they are beautiful women, but so is Lupita Nyong'o. So is Viola Davis. So is Regina King. So is Angela Bassett. But we get indoctrinated with, oh, this is what is beautiful. And the closer you are to white, the closer you are to having European features, then that is what is beautiful. So as individuals, when we are taking in and we're consuming all of this information and we're being individually conditioned, and some of us socially and individually conditioned to believe the things that we believe.
Absolutely. And the individual conditioning is such a big part of it, because everybody has the need to feel accepted.
Yes.
So, when you think about what's acceptable, so many of us live our lives about what's acceptable to everybody else.
Right.
So we want to fit in. So we want to be with what is everybody's looking at us. And so we want everybody's approval and everybody's to feel like, we're part of them. So we begin to make these choices that we've been, and there a lot of them are based on stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
We make these choices about what we've heard, about what we've said, about, what's being fed to us, like you said,
Right.
and we want to be on the side of the majority. So we allow ourselves to be swayed into this prejudice.
And I think too, now I don't know how much of it, I believe that now little black girls are being exposed to things different than Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. But let's face it, every little girl wants to be beautiful. Every little girl wants to be seen as beautiful. And when all you're seeing is Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, who do not look like me, they don't look like you either. Okay, so this is not, this is what you're seeing with Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. And even when you see some of the Disney stuff that's going on, Frozen and the princess, and every little girl wants to be a princess. Every little girl wants to be beautiful. And so when our children aren't seeing this, and we've got to be able to begin to show them images that reflect who they are. There are books out there now. Lupita Nyong'o did a book, Sulewi, that shows a deeply melanated girl and talks about beauty and all that. So we have to also make sure that we are exposing our children to the other side of what is not what they look like. Okay, so here is Cinderella, and she looks like you, baby girl. Okay, and it doesn't have to be that she's we don't have to always put the black label on it. Well, here's black Cinderella. No, here's Cinderella. She's just black. You know what I mean? She's just black.
Hello. And that is important, because then you get to those things where the doll test, where
Yes.
we as individuals we have prejudice about our own self. We
Right.
begin to see ourselves as not being beautiful, so we're prejudiced against ourselves.
Exactly.
And that causes so much damage. It causes low self-esteem. It causes depression. It causes anxiety. It causes, you've got these little kids that are hating themselves
Right.
because they feel prejudice against their own skin color, because they feel that somebody else is more beautiful because they've got a lighter skin, or they've got blonde hair, or they got long hair, or they got wavy hair, or whatever the problem is. And they're not seeing themselves as beautiful. So now they have a self-hatred, which is a prejudice. When you hate yourself because of the color of your skin and you
Right.
wish to be something else, that's a prejudice against yourself
That's right.
and against everyone who looks like you.
Exactly. And that's why we have to begin to, as adult women, we have to begin to reconcile within ourselves about how we feel about ourselves and how we see ourselves, and so that we can tell our children, our girls that are coming up, how beautiful they really are. And but they're only going to believe it if we believe it about ourselves. So we as
Absolutely.
women have to start embracing I am the color of beautiful. I am beautiful. I am beautiful the way that I am, so that we can tell our babies, our girls, you are beautiful the way you are. It came up on Facebook the other day again about that little girl. The hairdresser was doing her hair, and this baby, she was a baby, 4 years old or 5 years old, saying, "I'm ugly." And I'm like, how do you even know at 4 or 5 what ugly is?
Because somebody had preference,
Exactly.
supposedly preference, which was really a
Exactly.
racist prejudice, told
Exactly.
her that because of the color of your skin, you're not beautiful. And so we've really got to get away from that whole, just look at people for who they are.
Yes.
Once again, it's that whole package thing. It may not be packaged the way you think it should be packaged, but you're missing so much. I mean, there's a gift
Yes.
inside of every person.
Yes.
And if you're so busy looking at the wrapping that you don't want to open up the gift, you are missing something. There is golden treasures inside.
Yes.
And you're just like, oh, I don't like the way that one's wrapped.
Yes.
You're lost. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are back here with Colorism Conversations, and we're talking about is preference discrimination. Very interesting conversation we're having here about preference and discrimination. So, this last part we're going to talk about is preference is a slippery slope. So, we really want to talk about the slippery slope of preference, right? And is your preference discriminatory? So we've talked a lot about this during this show. And so we want to talk about the other areas in which we have to look at preference. So when you talk about preference in hiring, okay, I don't want to work with, I prefer not to work with Black people. I prefer to work with white people. I prefer to work with Black people. I don't want to work with white people. I prefer to work with men. I don't want to work with women. Prefer to work with women. I don't want to work with men. So here is where preference can definitely lead to discrimination.
Absolutely. When you're deciding who to hire, you also get the preference of, most of the time, our preferences, I shouldn't say, but a lot of times preferences are based on stereotypes.
Right.
So if you're saying, I don't want to work with women, then you start looking at, well, I don't want to work with dark-skinned women because they can be this, that, or the other. Or I don't want to work with light-skinned women because they can be this, that, or the other. Or I only prefer to work with, men. So what is it? First of all, stereotypes are just that. They're generalizations. So if you're going to tell me you prefer not to work with a dark-skinned or deeply melanated woman, why is that? What is your reasoning? And just because you had a bad experience with 3 or 4 before doesn't mean that you're going to have a bad experience with this one.
Right.
I prefer to work with men. Why is that? Because women are this, that, and the other. Are all women that way? So we really need to examine, when we say I prefer, what is the basis for our preference?
Right.
Is it based on fact? Is it based on stereotype? And if it's based on stereotype, then it's based most likely on a prejudice.
Right. And even if it's based on experience, once again, you cannot associate your experience, a bad experience, with one particular type of person and carry it across to all people who look like that person,
Right.
or who are the same sex as that person, or the same race as that person, just because you had a bad experience with one particular type of person.
Right.
And
And I try and
we've got to be open to new experiences and saying, okay, well, let me see who, first of all, is the most qualified. Because, it's always amazing to me when, as a Black woman, I have a phone interview and everything's great on the phone interview. But when I walk in that office and they see me, it's different.
Absolutely.
It's different. And so, now when you were talking to me on the phone, everything was cool because you really, I used to be told that I talk like a white person. Well, first of all,
What does that mean?
I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? That I talk like a white person? Exactly what does that mean? And I've asked people, so what do you mean by that? I talk like a white person. I don't even know what that means. So, because you were talking to me on the phone and you thought that because you didn't think you were talking to a Black woman, now I come into the office and you see very clearly that I am a Black woman. So now you have decided something else about me. And here comes your stereotype and your preference. Well, I really don't want to hire a Black woman.
Well, they use the term corporate culture. You don't fit our corporate culture. Well, maybe your corporate culture is
Needs to change.
prejudicial. Okay, because it shouldn't be so much about how I look. As if I am going for an interview with IBM and I fit all of your criteria, I've passed all of your tests, and you've talked to me on the phone, and I know what I'm talking about, and now it's just a matter of sealing the deal. When you see me, it shouldn't matter if I come in clean, if I come in, not appearing unkempt, I'm not drunk, I'm not on drugs, then what else is it that you need to know? Because I've got everything you need to do this job. But are you going to tell me I don't fit your corporate culture because I'm wearing an afro?
Right.
You're not hiring me for the way my hair looks. You're hiring me to do a job.
However, I might be hiring you to do a job, but this whole idea of corporate culture is I want people to look a certain way. I'm not saying it's right. Trust me, I'm not at all saying it's right. But this whole idea that I don't want somebody who really looks black. And that's what afros and locks and braids and cur- you know curly big hair it 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 sends the black signal, and I don't
But here's
want the
but,
black signal. I
but here's
don't
the
want you with the black signal, because what I want you to look like is as close to the corporate culture, which is straight hair. And I'm not saying anything against anybody that has straight hair. I'm not saying it, because you got to do what you got to do. Okay, I'm very much, you got to do what you got to do. I'll never forget India Ari singing the song "I Am Not My Hair." It was I can't remember what the show was, but Soledad O'Brien was there, and she said, beautiful song, but I really am my hair. Okay, because Soledad O'Brien, to be on I don't know if she was on CNN, whatever news show she was on, they weren't going for the really look black look.
Oh yeah, there was another newscaster that got fired because she decided to wear an afro.
Right.
So I mean, but you're losing your diversity.
Oh yeah.
You're losing the opportunity to glean from my knowledge,
And you want to do diversity on your terms.
and that's
You don't
it.
want to
And
really do
so
diversity.
we
You
can
don't
be
really want to
diverse
do
as long
diversity. You want to do diversity on your terms.
we can be diverse as long as you look like me,
Right. You don't look too black, whatever that is.
whatever
I don't
that
even
is.
know what that is.
So you just begin to um, and that is a prejudice because what
Yeah.
is the problem with me looking black? You have then, if I look black, then you are assuming that someone who looks black does what? And there we get into your prejudices because you've made an assumption about me that the package that I come in is going to behave a certain way.
Exactly. And it also moves into community. I don't want to live. I don't want to live with black. I don't want to live in the same community as black people. I don't want to live in the same community as white people. I don't want to live in the same community. It goes across the board with this whole preference. I prefer to live in a community that doesn't have a lot of black people in it.
Well, for some people that's not a preference. That's just an out and out. They just ain't gonna do it. Okay, it's not a preference. It's just if I don't have to do it, I'm not doing it. But once again, you lose that whole diversity, the whole opportunity to be exposed to so many different cultures and
Yeah,
so many different ways of lives and so many, you know, different people.
exactly. And exactly. And I think that if we can if we can look beyond what the stereotypes and what we see and what we've been made to believe, our lives would be so much richer, so much more. We would have so many interesting conversations.
Mm.
I really am very much about conversation. And we would have so many more interesting conversations if we would open up and not decide things based on what we've been told or what we've seen. Imagine having conversations with people from all parts of life, from all walks of life, from all over the world, from so many different cultures. Imagine how rich our lives would be having had that connection with other people instead of deciding on these preferences and these stereotypes and, well, I don't want to deal with that kind of person. I don't want to live near this kind of person. I don't want to work with these kind of people. I only want to date these kind of people. If we would get away from that and just open up and accept people for who they really are,
Right. And
embrace them.
you do, there's so many things that we do every day or say on a regular basis that really reflects that we still have some prejudices.
Oh, yes.
You know, I mean, from who I want to be my lawyer, who I want handling my money, who I want, as a business partner,
Who I want as
who
a
I want,
doctor.
who I want as a doctor. The only thing I can say is that, in my opinion, the preference might be legitimate if it's a mental health issue,
Oh, absolutely.
because there are certain things from a
Absolutely.
mental health standpoint that I feel that someone of the same race may be able to relate to better and understand better.
I worked for a mental health provider and I tried to explain that to them because they would say, when people would call up and they would say, I want a black therapist. And this mental health provider was like, well, people can't request black therapists. And I was like, why not? And they're going to tell me because every therapist can empathize. I can empathize with the person's situation. Or I said, no, they can't. And I had to explain to them that, first of all, someone who is is white cannot really empathize with what I have to deal with as a black woman. Number one. Number two, whether you realize it or not, racism is not just white people not liking black people. I said there are black people who don't like white people.
Mm-hmm.
There are black people who do not trust white people.
Mm-hmm.
See, you have to understand that it's not just all about you and the fact that, white people are racist. There are racist black people.
That's true. And not only is it about you being able to empathize with me, but a lot of it is you're being able to connect a little bit better and know what things are culturally
Hmm.
going to be affect me,
Right.
and how I'm going to be seen by my culture. Because as it is, it's getting better, but as it is, seeking mental health counseling is a stigmatism a lot of times in the black
Yes, it
community.
is.
So, to have, so that we're going to get off topic, but that's the only place where I say I don't think the preference is a prejudice, only because you need someone who can truly understand you from multiple aspects. And sometimes it's not even, sometimes you will find a black provider who doesn't understand, because once again, it's a matter a lot of times of where you grew up. If you grew up, you know, living, the high life, and I grew up, struggling for everything, we might not mesh either. Okay?
That's true.
But you might be able
That's
to
true.
still understand a little bit more of the culture, and
Right.
having experienced some of the things that I've experienced,
Right.
than me going to a provider who's not of my race. But I mean, on a consistent basis, we always are choosing people based on stereotypes. Like I say, who I want to be my lawyer, who I want handling my money,
Mm,
who I'm going to call for my computer, who I'm going to call to do my lawn.
right.
Okay? These are all, a lot of times, these are decisions we make not based on preference, but based on prejudice and
Right.
stereotypes.
Right. And not giving everyone an equal opportunity
That's it.
to provide services to us and really understanding that It's about who really can provide the best service to us. And sometimes it's people that look like us. Sometimes it might not be people who look like us.
That's true.
And so we've got to be open. Once again, it's that whole idea of being open and honest and willing to experience new and different things.
That's it. And if you prefer it because it's something that you experience and you've had experience with that person and you know that person, as long as it's not based on the color of their skin, but on experience, then that's fine. But when you start making those preferences and choices in your life based on stereotypes and the color of someone's skin,
Right.
then we really have to stop and think about that and evaluate our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. It's been a great conversation. And we really want to encourage you to start really examining what you're calling your preferences. And are you being discriminatory? Are you being a colorist? Are you being a racist? Are you being a sexist? Start looking at what these things that you talk about you prefer and examine yourself and examine your preferences. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode.
Check. Let me talk about our black women real quick. Check. Black on black and beauty's intact. Trust. There's nothing you lack. Nothing can ever sever our soul ties when we together. You my ride or die, girl. Forever, ever. Forever, ever. You fly in any weather. Black, intelligent, smart, and clever, full of grace and honor. How dare we ponder? Your strength make a black man's heart grow fonder. Protect our black queens at any cost. See, without the black queen, we catch a lost bee. Taking L's from left to right, vision blurred, but with the black queen, we elevate, you heard? Honey, caramel, hazelnut, bronze, chocolate, mocha, all shades, no cons. Skin absorbing all the sun, so much melanin. Love the color of your beauty and the light within. Concept, baby.
Concepts, you said it right. I am beautiful in God's sight. Don't you know I am Mother Earth? Everything black and beautiful I have birthed. Let's review my history. Something is steeped in mystery. Royal blood runs through my veins. I have carried my people's pains. I am dark like a night in Tunisia. I possess power and wealth like the Queen of Sheba.